Hello, and welcome to New Beginnings Start Today, the podcast for people who want to really grow deeper in their faith in the Lord. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Keffer, a minister, licensed clinical pastoral counselor here in Roanoke, Virginia, and I have a passion to help people grow their faith. Today, we're going to talk about contentment, and how you can see that having more and more is not necessarily the right way to see God's abundance for your life. Let's look at this. We are living with the most materialistic generation of all. They have an insatiable need to have more and expend an enormous amount of energy to do so. The force behind this kind of behavior is simply greed. The Greeks have a curious word to describe greed. It is a thirst to have more. The Bible gives strong warnings against the impact of greed or covetousness as a destructive, idolatrous sin rooted in the selfish desire for more money or power, asserting that true life is not defined by possessions. The Apostle Paul shares with the Christians at Philippi his thanks for their support being in prison in Rome when he writes, "I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know that I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." Philippians 4, verses 10 through 12. This man went from being wealthy as a Pharisee to a man who only had the clothes on his back, being imprisoned in Rome for his desire to share his faith in the one who gives contentment, the Lord Jesus. Listen to what Paul said he had learned in life. "I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." Philippians 4:12b. Paul had learned that his circumstances did not define him, but rather his faith in the Lord is what allowed him to live above what was happening to him in his physical world. Try to imagine what he had experienced as the Pharisee of Pharisees, as he described his life at one point. He had the finest of everything. He was brilliant, knowing the scriptures basically from memory. He was respected by his fellow rulers as a man who had an effect on his world in very significant ways. His greed for power and prestige drove him to want to imprison or kill the Christians who threatened his authority. This all changed for Paul when he met Jesus on the road to Damascus, as recorded in the 9th chapter of the book of Acts. His attention went from having more of what the world offered him, power and wealth, to learning a new way of living, and that of serving a master other than himself. The greedy person reaches a point in their life where they cheat, steal, defraud, and exploit the vulnerable to obtain unnecessary material gain. These attributes can very easily cause a person to fall into sinful behavior that can steal their lives away from really living with contentment. I grew up knowing a man who fit the behavior of this one who allowed their possessions to rule them. He owned a farm near where my parental grandparents lived. He was known for his miserly way of living. He did not associate with anyone and was very secretive about what he did on his farm. He farmed his land using workhorses because he did not want to spend the money on a tractor. He drove a Model T Ford because he thought it frivolous to spend the money on a new car. You could tell when he was going to town because you could hear the sound of that Model T coming past the cemetery where he had to drive past to get to town. When I would see him driving up the hill, I would wave hello to him to only get a scowl given back. The writer of Proverbs teaches us a word of caution about why not to live like this man when he says, "Do not overwork to be rich, because of your own understanding cease. Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like an eagle toward heaven." Proverbs 23, verses 4 and 5. This validates the old saying, "You can't take it with you." But this man lived as though he could. He was sadly mistaken because when he died, his grandson inherited the farm. This grandson took a portion of the money his grandfather had hoarded and built a beautiful church building for the community that he lived in, close to where his grandfather had lived. My dad attended the dedication of the new church building. He says, "Doug, it is beautiful." Many people really believe that if they work harder, they will be able to acquire more riches and be happier if they do. This is a lie that Satan has used with countless people over many generations, and it has worked very well for him, Satan. But that's all it is, a lie. We have to learn that being content in life is a lifestyle that gives one the freedom to really enjoy life and not feel hardened by what the day has done to them. Contentment is an inward, spiritual state of satisfaction and peace rooted in trust in God's sovereignty rather than external circumstances. It allows us to have freedom in the Lord. The writer of Proverbs gives us great insight into this truth when he writes, "The fear of the Lord leads to life, and he who has it will abide in satisfaction. He will not be visited with evil." Proverbs 19, verse 23. This is exactly how my wife's Aunt Gloria Jean lived. She was diagnosed with cancer, and her doctors went over all the options for treatment that were available to her. She and her husband, Don, talked, and her desire was for nature to take its course. She knew the trust that the Lord knows that when he is going to take me, and that is what I'm going to do. That was her resolve. The trust she had in God's care for her life is how she went from day to day with no regrets. Her faith was a tremendous witness to her family and friends. Gloria Jean taught those around her that her trust in God's care of her living with cancer really did lead to life. I want you to really understand the importance of putting your life in God's hands and obeying what you know he teaches you about allowing contentment in life to be more important than the riches that can be so tempting. Having all those bright and shiny things. I'm thinking about the person who has to trade their car in every year because they just have to have a new car. They cannot be content with the car that is only a year old because they are never content with their circumstances. This is the same person who has to have the newest cell phone as soon as they are eligible. It has to have all the bells and whistles, or it's just not good enough. Their house is filled with all the new gadgets for the kitchen and electronics for them to play with. Seeking after these things becomes their identity. This is so sad. The Apostle Paul teaches the young preacher Timothy a very positive way to teach people how to live in freedom from the bondage of being greedy when he writes, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that." Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plague people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. 1 Timothy 6, verses 6 through 10. This is a tremendous way to live. Paul says some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. 1 Timothy 6, 10b. There are so many people who have been raised with no spiritual direction in their lives. They have been at the mercy of what their environment has taught them. More is better. This eagerness to have money and all that goes with it has caused many to go astray. Paul says that this can also be true for Christians. Finding success in their lives monetarily has caused many Christians to go down the wrong path. It can start with little things like stopping going to church regularly. They now have a nice boat, and Sunday is the only day we have to have fun because we are working 6 days a week to sustain this new lifestyle that is so much fun. Many marriages are sacrificed because the attention has shifted to making the next big deal a reality, which is more important than being loving and caring with the spouse and thus the family. It doesn't take long to talk with people who have strayed into this path to know that they have allowed their greed to displace the contentment they once knew. The writer of Hebrew gives us great wisdom on how to live free from greed and have contentment in one's life when he writes, "Keep yourselves free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, 'Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you.'" Hebrews 13:5. There is nothing more you need to be promised than, "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." You can live in this truth and find peace and happiness in a relationship with God and His Son Jesus, and that can last and will last a lifetime. Being content. Thank you for listening to this episode. And I want to invite you to contact me and share how you are learning to be content in your circumstances by trusting God with your life. Answer this question. How has God blessed you in ways the world could not have? If you're seeing this on YouTube, please click the subscribe button and the like button. Also, click on the share button and share it with all your friends. That would be so helpful to me. Tell me about other issues you would like me to address by leaving your comments. And you can email me at drdouglaskeffer@gmail.com. I also encourage you to pick up a copy of my book, New Beginnings Start Today, and you can find that on my website, drdouglaskeffer.com. Click on the link below. Until next time, God bless each of you.